The morning sun filtered gently through the lace curtains of Willowmere Care Home in Shrewsbury. A familiar tapping of a walking cane echoed in the hallway as Edith Wren, now in her late 70s, arrived with her usual grace. In her hand, a tartan thermos, and a photo album tied with a faded ribbon. Douglas Wren sat by the window, staring at the magnolia tree in bloom. His grey eyes were distant, tracing the shapes of clouds like a child guessing animals. Edith approached, her smile soft but practiced. "Good morning, love," she said, pouring the tea into his favourite chipped mug. "Earl Grey, no sugar, just the way you always liked it." Douglas blinked at her. He gave a courteous nod, the kind you'd give a polite stranger. She didn't flinch. Instead, she opened the photo album and began again. Page 1, Wedding Day, 1963. "Here we are at St. Mary's," she said gently, tracing the outline of a younger Douglas. "It rained just before we stepped out. You said it was lucky." Douglas leaned forward, squinting. I don't know these people," he mumbled. "That's all right," Edith replied, brushing his hair with a small comb from her purse. "You knew them once." And so their morning went, a poem, a photo, a warm sip of tea. No recognition. Only presence. Lily Wren bounded through the care home gates, her school uniform slightly rumpled, red ribbons bouncing in her plaits. She stopped when she saw her grandmother in the garden, holding Douglas's hand while reading aloud from The Wind in the Willows. "Gran!" she called, running up. Edith looked up, her expression immediately warmer. "Hello, darling." Douglas glanced at Lily. "And who's this wee one, then?" "I'm Lily, Grandpa," the girl said shyly. "Your granddaughter." Douglas frowned. "I don't. I'm sorry." Lily turned to Edith. "Gran, why do you keep coming if he doesn't even know who you are?" The question hung in the air, tender and sharp. Edith closed the book, kissed Douglas's knuckles, and then looked her granddaughter in the eye. "Because I still know who he is," she whispered. Days passed like drifting leaves. Edith came every morning, her footsteps steady and sure, even though Douglas's eyes often wandered as if lost in a fog. The nurses at Willowmere would sometimes watch quietly, moved by the gentle routine. One late afternoon, Edith sat beside Douglas in the garden, the sun soft behind the clouds. She held his hand tightly, feeling the faint tremble beneath her fingers. "Douglas," she whispered, "do you remember the lake at Ellesmere? How we used to sit by the water and watch the swans glide?" He looked at her with cloudy eyes, a shadow of recognition flickering briefly. "Swans," he murmured. "Yes, swans. You told me once they were graceful but strong." Douglas squeezed her hand lightly. Edith smiled, a tear escaping down her cheek. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small worn notebook. "I've been writing poems for you," she said. "Do you want to hear one?" Douglas nodded slowly. Edith cleared her throat and began. "In silent mornings, your hand in mine. Though memories fade like distant chimes. Love holds on, beyond time's sway. Forever near, come what may." For a moment, Douglas's eyes softened. A faint smile appeared on his lips, the kind he used to have when he was truly present. At that moment, Lily appeared with Sister Marianne, carrying a tray of cookies and hot chocolate. "Look, Grandpa, I brought your favorite," Lily said, holding out a biscuit. Douglas reached out, taking it gently. Edith looked at them both and felt a quiet peace. That evening, as Edith left the home, she paused at the gate and looked back at Douglas sitting by the window. Though he had forgotten her name, the touch of their hands spoke louder than words. The weeks grew colder as autumn settled over Shrewsbury, the leaves turning burnt amber and gold. Edith found comfort in the garden of Willowmere, where the old magnolia had lost most of its petals, but the memories there still bloomed. One afternoon, she took Douglas outside, guiding him slowly along the stone path beneath the skeletal branches. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of damp earth and fading flowers. Douglas, Edith said softly, do you remember when we planted this tree together? You said it would grow strong like us. Douglas stopped and looked around. His eyes were cloudy, but he gently rested his hand on the rough bark. It feels familiar, he murmured. Edith smiled, squeezing his hand. It's our tree. A little piece of us in this garden. They sat on a wooden bench nearby, where Edith unfolded the photo album once more. This time, she showed Douglas pictures of their children, then Lily. Douglas studied the photos quietly, a rare glimmer of recognition in his gaze when he saw Lily's face. She's lovely, he said softly. She's our sunshine, Edith replied, brushing a stray hair from her cheek. Lily, watching from a distance with Sister Marianne, whispered, Grandpa still knows me, even if he forgets everything else. Edith's heart swelled. She reached into her coat pocket and took out a small brass key on a ribbon. This, she said, is for the little box I gave you years ago, the one with all our letters. Douglas took the key, turning it slowly between his fingers, as if holding onto a fragile thread of the past. One chilly morning, Edith arrived at Willowmere earlier than usual. The crisp air made the garden sparkle with frost, and she carried a fresh bouquet of lavender and daisies, Douglas's favorites. Inside, she found Douglas seated by the window, staring out blankly. She sat beside him and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. Good morning, love, she said softly. Douglas turned to her and for a moment, his eyes cleared, and he whispered, Edith. Her heart skipped. It was the first time in weeks he spoke her name aloud. Yes, it's me, she smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Douglas reached for her hand, holding it as if it were an anchor. I'm sorry, he said weakly, for forgetting. Don't apologize, Edith replied firmly. You don't forget the love we shared. It's here, she tapped her chest, and it's here, she placed her hand over his heart. The nurse entered quietly, smiling at the touching scene. Later that day, Lily sat by Douglas's side reading aloud from a book of poems Edith had brought. Douglas listened intently, the words seeming to awaken something deep inside. Edith looked on, hopeful. Though the fog of Alzheimer's still clouded many memories, the name Edith was a beacon shining through the mist, a symbol of love that time could not erase. Days blended into weeks as winter's chill settled over Shrewsbury. Edith continued her daily visits, each one a quiet testament to the love that refused to fade. One morning, as she arrived with Lily, Douglas seemed more alert. He smiled faintly when Lily ran up to him, her laughter bright in the cold air. Grandpa, Lily said excitedly, look what I made for you. She handed him a colorful card, covered in hand-drawn flowers and a big, shaky heart. Douglas held the card close, and for a fleeting moment, he looked up at Edith. Thank you, he said softly. For all of it. Edith's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled warmly. You don't have to thank me. We made these memories together. Later that day, Edith sat beside Douglas, reading from the old photo album once more. They paused at a picture of their wedding day, two young faces full of hope and promise. I promised you, Douglas, Edith said, that no matter what happened, I would always be here. Douglas reached out and squeezed her hand, his grip a little stronger. The nurse came in to check on them and whispered, you both are an inspiration. Edith looked at Douglas and whispered, tomorrow is another day, and I'll be here, every day. Despite the struggles of memory and time, their love was a steady light in the fading days, a promise that outlasted forgetting. The first snow of winter blanketed Shrewsbury in soft white, muffling the sounds of the waking town. Edith wrapped Douglas in a warm shawl and wheeled him outside for a final walk through the garden they both cherished. The magnolia tree stood bare now, its petals long gone, but beneath it, the earth was ready for new life. Edith smiled at the thought, just as their love had endured through every season. Douglas looked up at her, his eyes clear and calm for a fleeting moment. Edith, he said softly, thank you, For holding my hand, even when I forgot your name. Tears welled in Edith's eyes, but her smile never faded. I'll always hold your hand, she whispered. Because love isn't just in the memory, it's in the heart. As the snowflakes fell gently around them, Edith knew their story was not about the memories lost, but the love that remained, strong, silent, and true. And in that quiet winter garden, hand in hand, they were home. Months passed since that snowy day in the garden. Douglas had peacefully slipped away, leaving behind a world touched by his kindness and a love that had never wavered. Edith kept visiting Willowmere, now to share stories with Lily, their granddaughter, about the life she and Douglas had built together. One afternoon, Edith and Lily sat beneath the budding magnolia tree in their own garden. Lily held a photo album, smiling as she traced the faces of her grandparents. "Grandma," Lily said softly, "I think I understand now why you never gave up on Grandpa, even when he forgot everything." Edith smiled, her eyes shining with quiet joy. Because love is more than memories. It's a promise, to hold on, even when everything else slips away. Lily hugged her tightly. "And I'll carry that promise too," she whispered. The magnolia tree blossomed bright and strong, a living symbol of a love that would live on, through every generation.